the most amazing thing when something you talked to them about, or you showed them, or you explained to them, or it was important to you, and you didn't think was resonating, and then it just like clicks. Whether it's when they're young or old, that's like, to me, that's like what makes it all worth it. How funny is it that Jones is like super into heavy metal now? Like, he not only asks to listen to heavy metal, he only likes it if it's very loud.
He asked to listen to Headbangers.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, in the car.
That's amazing.
He asked to listen to Headbangers. And then what's the, he said he wants to listen to the Killing one.
Oh, he likes Killing in the Name of by Rage Against the Machine.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's casual. You're 3.5 years old.
Yeah.
No big deal.
He likes stuff that's really loud.
But it's also interesting that like Clark's like music taste like has definitely gone more rock.
Yes.
Like I think it's like interesting how his is like has veered off that path. I think he was like kind of into it a little bit. Like Jones has gone like more hard to heavy metal, and then Clark's gone more rock. Neither of them are interested in any of my music, which is very
But you
rude.
don't have musical taste.
That's very rude.
No, I mean, you don't. I wouldn't say like you're into X kind of music. You're into like a bunch of different types of music.
Do you want to just like casually share your most listened to song on Spotify?
No. No, don't. But yeah, that's one of the first things where I was like, oh, they like what I like. This is awesome. I mean, there's obviously been little things, but that was the first one where he's like sort of objectively interested in it, and weirdly not something I've pushed like at all.
No, and you haven't pushed it at all. I would say maybe you did a little bit more with
That's
Clark.
what I mean. I think with Clark I did, and it didn't.
But
totally
then his
work.
is like also that's a little bit more like Rage Against the Machine is a little bit like harder than like
that's not actually a band that I'm like a huge fan of. That's just I remember he wanted to listen to something very loud, and that was something I picked, and he was like, it like clicked, and then like I've been listening to it.
But he likes listening to Crazy Train. He likes.
Yes, they like, well, but I think ironically, or interestingly, the thing he really likes is whatever it is, very loud, which is great.
Headbangers.
No, there's a story, I think it's in the Daily Dad book, where like Jack Harbaugh, who was a college football coach, every day he would like drop their kids off at school, and he would say something like get out there, take the day by storm, and don't take any wooden nickels, like some weird like saying, probably something he heard from his dad. And his like kids like rolled their eyes at him like every time he heard it, and they never acknowledged it in any way. They never asked him what it meant in any way. And then when John Harbaugh, I think one of his sons gets a job like as the head coach of Stanford, and he gives his like first press conference, and the dad's watching it on TV, and he's like, we're going to get up there, we're going to take the day by storm, and we're not going to take any wooden nickels. And it's like 30 years later, he's like, oh my God, like they actually heard what I was saying. That's the most amazing thing, when like something you talked to them about, or you showed them, or you explained to them, or it was important to you, and you didn't think was resonating, and then it just like clicks. Whether it's when they're young or old, that's like, to me, that's like what makes it all worth it.
I don't feel like I've had any of those moments with our kids yet.
Is that
but
true?
I would definitely, for sure, like when we were...
No, you definitely have, because Clark will say things like, respect my bodily space, or like,
that's my...
No, but like
that's the thing that I'm talking about that resonates.
Where could you have possibly... Where could you have... Like, he'll just say something like... Or it's usually, it was like... Is it like, Clark, you have to like get in the shower now, and he'll be like, my body, my choice, you know, like he'll say something.
I'm just saying that to you, the thing that is like mine that I'm instilling in our children is just general bodily anatomy, or like autonomy. Anatomy.
Yes.
Hopefully also.
Yeah. No, but you're just like, oh, okay, I don't think sometimes it's like a preference, but it's just like, oh, they actually heard me. Like they're now using it against me in this very moment, or they're totally misconstruing it, or they're saying it just to mess with me. But I thought they weren't listening, and in fact they were listening. That's like a very wonderful
Right,
thing.
like when Clark wouldn't let me cut his nails the other day because you said,
yes,
my body, my choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's super annoying, but at the same time, like,
That's not annoying. I respect that.
Yeah. Or it's like, we've said like we don't have secrets in our family. And then you're like, let's say you're like trying to convince them something. Like, let me tell you a secret. Like, just let me tell you this. And they're like, no, we don't have secrets in this family. And you're like, because you're like, it's true. You're like, you're trying to make an exception to the rule. And they're like, you said this was the rule.
We have
There's
the
no
rules
exception
for a
to the rule."
reason,
Yeah,
and we do
exactly.
not make exceptions to these rules.
Yes, exactly.
It sounds like I'm really good at setting boundaries with the kids, and that you are trying
And then
to.
so what I'm doing is I'm helping them by testing the boundaries. It's just it's like a stress test. It's all part of the coordinated plan.
Wow, we've got a lot to unpack here. We only have 20 minutes, Ryan.
The other question I had for you was, who do you think is harder on themselves as a parent?
Me.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Do you think women are harder? Do you think moms are harder on themselves than dads?
Seems like a loaded question.
Yes, that's why I'm asking it.
I don't know.
I sadly, I would say if you asked, it's like, are you doing a bad job? I bet more moms would say yes than dads, even though more dads probably are doing a bad job. So what is that?
I don't know. I don't know what that is. You think more moms think that they're doing a bad job? You think that's just general? You think like that would be the...
Well, I think moms have, let's say, more of a standard that they judge themselves against. I think there's more of an expectation. And I also think, though, probably that the sort of mental load falls, like I'm not saying, like, even in families where the actual responsibilities are relatively equal, I still imagine that some of the more sort of like karmic or mental load of like judging whether this is a success or failure, whether you're doing enough or not doing enough, I bet that unfairly is assumed by moms more often than dads. Because especially if we're thinking about how these things have evolved culturally, some like my generation of dads is doing a lot of stuff for the first time, like stuff that like I do things that my dad never did, right? And so that's an unfamiliar sort of like new burden, and not in the sense that it's a burden, but that's a new set of responsibilities. And then so to also be able to evaluate whether I'm doing them well or not is I think it's harder for some dads to get there.
Okay, so we were kind of talking about this last night when you posted something on Instagram from Daily Dad.
Yeah, what were we talking about?
Okay, you posted something from Daily Dad on Instagram, and it was like totally open-ended
Yes.
about allowing your kids to just have choice or accept things without judgment.
It was about having fewer opinions about things that your kids do, just letting them be what they are.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Kind of open-ended, whatever. And the comments, it was like just endless comments about like, but what about this? But what about this? But what about this? And like all of the comments were just like all of these people projecting feelings and thoughts onto this like semi-open-ended post that you could put on Instagram.
But you know what? Weirdly, I don't think there was any women that were doing that.
No.
It was entirely
It was
men.
totally men, right? So, which is like what I'm coming back to this about, which I think most people on Instagram who are like commenting angrily or
Yes, as a general societal trend, most angry commenters are men. Yes.
like I think that like, and like this is kind of a totally roundabout way to answer your question, and I may not even be answering your question, which I don't really know how podcasts work, but I'm just gonna say that's generally how they work.
So think about it in terms of sound bites. So actually, the long meandering answers are not super helpful, but carry on.
Okay. I feel like you started to get into Stoicism as a way to help yourself be better. Mm-hmm. And I think you got into Daily Dad, let's say, as a way to help yourself be a better dad,
Yes.
right? And I think that it's like you started digging into these parenting examples and this path to be a better person for our kids.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
And I think it's like you've opened up this space to do that for other people, much in the same way as you've done for Stoicism.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm saying that I think that you've done that for other
yeah,
people. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to agree to that because it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, try to be a little humble here.
Okay.
Okay. Like, I think that there are some examples, like, I think that that's like a new thing that exists for dads.
Yes. That's sort of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. So, like, moms are extremely hard on themselves because I think that they have judged the like success of their entire family on themselves. And I think that like the dads are kind of like still in that defensive space that you saw in that Instagram post that you like yesterday. They're kind of in that like
I totally disagree.
do you think so?
Yeah, I would say I think women having, for the most part, assumed the responsibility of the family.
Right. Okay.
Like have a lot of women and models to compare themselves to. Like I think for women, it's like mommy bloggers. It's like, am I as perfect as this person? Am I doing as much as this person?
Right, okay.
Right. So there's a lot of that. That's where I think a lot of the guilt / comparison comes from.
Right.
For the dads that are responding this way, I think they're actually, what they're not liking is it's sort of this older energy of the like, I do what I do, dad knows best. How
Right.
dare you imply that like I don't know how to do it? So I think the defensiveness is actually not from a like newly embracing accountability, but the not liking.
I'm saying
accountability.
like that is like what I'm saying is that like that is an example of like the necessity of there to be
Yes.
a space, there being a space for like change in that
Totally.
atmosphere or whatever. Like it is an example that like that like much like that like toxic dad energy still exists.
Yeah, of course. The like, I'm the head of this family. Like, I don't. Dad doesn't allow that. Like,
Right.
that I hate that energy. That's like the grossest energy. And to me, that's the opposite of what Daily Dad is actually about. To me, like Daily Dad, it's only called Daily Dad because I'm a dad, not because it's about like dad energy. And that's something as I even just noticing my assumptions, I'd say dad a lot when really I mean parent, because I don't think
Right.
that one role should be one way or the other. But there is, I think, kind of like a comfort in like the authoritarian sort of like dad knows best role that doesn't actually challenge a person emotionally, ethically, morally, spiritually. And like to me, what Daily Dad is about becoming a better person and thus a better parent, not becoming more like dad or more mom.
Well, okay. One, authoritative and authoritarian are two very different things. Authoritative is like more of a way that you should strive to be as a parent.
Maybe.
Authoritarian is not that.
Well, yes, of course. There's definitely authoritarian parents, male and female, but I also just mean like that the sort of authoritative, like this is the way, this is how it is.
I mean, the gender normativeness of this entire conversation is making me extremely uncomfortable. But we're talking about like general parenting. There's like the like I don't know. I don't really know how to answer your original question.
Which to me, it's a very straightforward question because I think the answer is like self-evident. I think moms are much harder on themselves and work harder at being good at the thing than dads do.
Yeah.
Like I think they have more things that they monitor. They have more things that they hold themselves accountable to. There's more things that they aspire to do. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of dudes are kind of like along for the ride. I'm not exempting myself from that. And there's times when I've been more along for the ride than I should have been. But I think the idea is, like if you're not thinking, I have a thing in Daily Dad where it's like, sometimes you question whether you're like doing a good job or whether you're doing enough, like as a parent. And to a certain extent, asking that question is evidence that you are doing a good job. Because you know who's not thinking it? The authoritarian parents who are convinced that they're perfect and flawless and should never be questioned. And that arrogance and ego is not good for kids. And then on the other hand, there's parents who are so apathetic, so disinterested, who have kids, but I would not say are parents. Those are also the ones who are never questioning whether they're doing a good job or not. So that even the ability to stop before you go to bed or to sit down and think and go like, am I doing this right? Am I screwing this up? Am I really trying? That's a very revealing question. And it's important that you realize that not every parent is doing that.
Right. So you know how we talk about sometimes like the like farther in you get to doing something, like the harder it is to look back and remember what it's like to be new at it. So it's hard to remember like the steps it took to get to where you are in the journey.
Yeah.
I think that there are roles in parenting that you like. I realize that I've had for a really long time. That like, I think that you and I are actually probably now have like created some semblance of balance, but maybe like even a couple months ago, where I realized that I couldn't just easily pass those things off to you, and I thought that we were in the same spot.
Interesting.
So like what it takes to like go on a trip.
Yes. There's certain things that if the one parent drops, the other takes care of. And you can be very comfortable not thinking about those things. Just like your kids can be like, somebody picks out my clothes, somebody makes sure there's groceries,
and it should,
does my
to
laundry.
me, it's like, wait, we've both been in this parenting game the same amount of time. There's no reason one of us should be starting from step one when the other one is 7 years in. Why would you be on step one when I'm in it? I've been in it for 7 years. But then I just realized that I've been carrying the mental load of it for 7 years while you've just been not carrying the mental load of it at all for 7 years.
Yes.
I think those are the type of things that like, I think that can definitely, like one parent can carry a lot more heavily than another parent. And I think traditionally that's like the mother.
But the mental load, to me, the most important mental load is like, there's the mental load of who sends out the Christmas cards and the mental loads of, who make sure that the refrigerator is
But this is like the mental health of the family.
But the ultimate mental load, it's like the board of directors, the CEO of the company has to go like, are we heading in the right direction?
Right.
Are we prepared for an uncertain future? Are we ready to be disrupted? These are like the big existential like questions that like the janitor can't be thinking about, the middle managers can't be thinking about, the retail employees can't be thinking about. And so if the board is not thinking about them, the company's going to eventually...
Are you saying that I'm the board of the family?
No. I'm look, because one of our kids is obsessed with the Titanic. The captain of the Titanic was ultimately not that serious or interested in the threat of icebergs. And so everyone else thought the other person, like someone higher up in the chain, was thinking about it, and they ultimately weren't. The captain wasn't that concerned about it, and so they crashed into an iceberg and it sunk.
Well, that's
both,
an oversimplification of what happened
that's exactly
to the Titanic.
What happened. That's exactly what
I
happened.
could go into this because
We could, but
3.5-year-olds
that's
obsessed with the
exactly what happened. The captain ultimately signaled down through the ranks of the ship
that it would be fine.
That the ship was ultimately unsinkable, and that if they saw an iceberg, they would have a chance to move. Whatever. The point is, if both parents are not thinking, are we doing a good job? Are we going in the right direction? What could we do better? What we talked about recently, which is like, what are things we need to stop doing? Who is thinking, like, who's going to be thinking about that? Your child's therapist 30 years from now, right? So you have to think about those things.
Right.
And I'm not saying both parents should be really hard on themselves, but I'm saying both parents should be stepping back and asking that question about what they're doing. And if they're not, it's not fair to the spouse who may be doing it, and it's definitely not fair to your kids who need you to do it. if you don't want to wake up one day having crashed into an iceberg, or the other metaphor, if you don't want to wake up one day and realize that you went very far in a direction that you don't want to have gone because you didn't step back and go, what am I doing? What should I not be doing? How could I be doing this better? We know a person, is it Jim Shields? He's like, they have family board meetings.
Right.
And like, they do it surfing, so it's like a play on both. But the point is, like, are you stepping back and thinking about that? That's the most important thing.
Could we be overthinking it?
Sure, you can overthink anything. But again, to go to what we're talking about with overprotectiveness, the idea that most parents are overthinking it is preposterous. I mean, the vast majority of people are underthinking it. The vast majority of kids deserve and could have better.
Right.
You're probably not overthinking it. It's like The Office. He goes, I think you're overthinking it. And he goes, I think you're underthinking it. You're probably underthinking it. Your chances are you're underthinking it. You're underdoing it. You could do more. And you're fooling yourself if you think you got it. And if you think you have time to respond on like Daily Dad's Instagram to be like, what about this? But, like, I don't know about that. That energy is probably a sign that you are not asking enough questions and that you're easily triggered because deep down you're insecure about what you're doing and you suspect it's probably the wrong way.
Do people not understand that, like, well, no, they don't. People do not understand boundaries or guidance or, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, Tom Segura, who we bumped into the other day, he has this great bit about how he's like, now that I have kids, there's things I don't have time for. And he's like, you know what I used to have time for? I used to have time to disagree with people. He's like, now if I go to a party and someone asks my opinion about something and I say it and they go, no, I think this. He goes, yeah, you're right. That's the thing. He's like, I don't have time to disagree with people, especially my own parents. I just say, yeah, whatever you think. And his point was that, like, you don't have time to disagree with people about things that don't matter. Mm-hmm. The irony of that Daily Dad post that people got so mad about was like, you will be happier and your family will be better if you have less opinions about things that are really not that important. And a good chunk of the listeners responded by having opinions about that statement. And like, one thing you don't have time for as a parent, one thing you do not have time for now that you have kids is arguing with strangers on the internet. You do not have time for it. No. You should stop doing it.
Well, that one was like interesting to me because I think early in our relationship, you and I had a conversation. Like we used to bicker about like something stupid all the time. And I can't remember what it was, but I remember having like a very intentional conversation with you. It'd be like, I just decided that I'm not going to care about this anymore.
Yes.
Like, I just decided that I'm going to come home from work and not let it bother me anymore. Like, you can either change it or don't change it, but like, it's not going to be important.
Yeah, and especially with your kids, like, is this thing worth taking a debit out of your relationship with your kids? Like, your kid, like, I just think about all the things my parents didn't let me do as a kid that ultimately didn't matter, right? Again, we're not talking about, like, why couldn't I have a GoPed or something?
Right.
But it's like, why was it really important to them how long my hair was or whether I listened to this? Like, they just had opinions about stuff that caused conflict that had they not had an opinion about, we would have been closer.
Well, like, it was like, I'll use the example that I'm thinking of is like, I saw it as like a reflection of how you felt about me and our space or whatever, when really, no, like, you were just busy and like whatever. Yeah. It had nothing to do with anything. And like, I think that's like, that is what you were referring to, I assume, when you were like writing this thing for Daily Dad, which is that like, how long your hair is not important towards anything. Like, this is like how you look in a family picture. Like, who gives a shit?
Well, one of the ones that I was talking about, to get a little personal, is like, my dad had strong opinions about my sister wanting to have only vegetarian food at their wedding. And like, even though they were paying for it or whatever, I just remember thinking like, literally, what do you give a shit? Like, no one will die if there's not meat at the wedding. It's important to this person. Like why have even one conversation about it? Like, if that's what they want, that's what they want. It's not a thing that you need to know better about. Maybe you need to know better about like whether they should backpack through insert dangerous country without anyone going with them. Like, we're actually, let's say real safety is at play or something, but like, you don't need to have an opinion about this. And by choosing to have an opinion about it, or rather, you can have the opinion, you don't have to express the opinion. By expressing the opinion, you are saying, me being right about this thing is more important than this other thing, which of course I've never done in our relationship.
Can I ask you a question?
Wait, I was going to bring up one thing. Speaking of like disagreements, the other one that I like is, remember Zach and Christy said that their rule was they never, what? I'm not allowed to say people's names.
Did you just put a mug straight on that shelf without a coaster? I have like 45 coasters
This
in
is
here.
empty. It never had anything in it.
Ryan.
Hey, pay attention. They said Zach and Christy's rule was we will not argue. Hey, there's microphones. You can't bang things together. they said we won't argue about anything that can be solved by Googling. They found themselves like arguing over a fact, and the fact was verifiable or not. It's like we could end this right now by just looking up the answer instead of the two of us having opinions about those answers. And I do think that has saved us a handful of fights, probably not as many as it should have, but realizing that like you don't need to argue about things that are objective. You can just get the answer and then move on.
But that's like you and my favorite thing to argue about is like things that we like Google.
All right, what's your question? Then we'll wrap up.
How I can't concentrate in this room at all. Like at all. This is a torture
Because your
chamber.
ADD
This
is
is like a
reading all the
torture
titles?
chamber for me. This was literally an hour of torture. Like I could not concentrate at all. I have read every title of every book in this entire room.
I've read maybe 7 of them.
How?
Everyone, and then I immediately forget what they are, and I move.
How?
Yeah,
Do you want me to give you a catalog? I could tell you literally every book in this entire room.
I don't. I'm good.
It's awful.
I'll hang up a curtain behind me next time.
Oh my God. I mean, I probably could tell you the books behind me. I don't know what we talked about. This is very stressful for me.